I'm very happy to welcome tonight Dr. Aarati Didwania to present the 11th session of the MACP Wisdom and Wellbeing series, Understanding Microaggressions, What They Are and Why They Are Harmful. Dr. Didwania is a professor of medicine and medical education at the Northwestern University Feinberg School of Medicine. She completed her medical degree at the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine and her residency in internal medicine at the University of Chicago Hospitals. She has several leadership and educational roles at Northwestern, including Associate Vice Chair for Faculty Affairs, Director of the Readiness for Residency Program, Director of the Mentoring Program for the Division of General Internal Medicine, Site Director of the M3 Clerkship in Internal Medicine, and key clinical faculty in the Internal Medicine Residency. Clinically, she is the director of the STAR program, caring for adult survivors of childhood cancer, frequently on service as a teaching attending and an active primary care practitioner. So I'm very happy to welcome Dr. Didwania here tonight to talk to us about microaggressions. If anyone has questions, please feel free to put them in the chat while we're going. And Dr. Didwania, why don't you go ahead and take it away?
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity to speak with all of you this evening. I look forward to sort of a very active discussion after I go through a little bit of didactics. And my goal really is to get people to think about what microaggressions really are and whether they think that they are harmful or how they're going to process what microaggressions mean to people who are either delivering them or receiving them. And so I am going to make sure I can forward my slides. I don't have anything to disclose in terms of conflicts of interest. And like I mentioned, my objective is to really talk about what microaggressions are, talk about some of the known adverse outcomes of microaggressions, and then talk about, experiences with microaggressions and implicit bias in the workplace that you may have either seen or felt yourself. And that will be the focus of the breakout sessions after a little bit of didactics. So Dr. Heinen mentioned a little bit about my background. This isn't meant for me to get a bunch of accolades. This is really to talk about why I feel like I can speak on this topic a little bit. So I've had the unique opportunity to interact with all levels of medical training simultaneously. So I get to talk to medical students, residents, mentor faculty in my division as well as other divisions within internal medicine. And I feel one of the things that comes up a lot is people's issues long-term with burnout or feeling valued in the workplace. And some of what I've found that contributes to this is receiving microaggressions. And so I started delving into microaggressions almost 10 years ago. After reading an article in The Atlantic that was called Coddling of the American Mind. And it was an article written about universities and their approach to microaggressions. And the article was actually on the side of, well, do we really want to alter how we're educating our students in order to prevent them from experiencing microaggressions? But at that point, this article is it's over 10 years old now. I didn't really know what microaggressions were. So I looked into this a little bit, and I'm going to use definitions so that we're all on the same page. So we have the same vocabulary that we're using when we talk about microaggressions. And Daryl Wing-Sue is a professor at Columbia who sort of used microaggressions very early on to describe experiences that are brief and commonplace. They can be verbal, behavioral, or environmental, indignities specifically, and they can be intentional or unintentional. And that'll be really important as we talk about, are they harmful or not? They communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative slights. And they have harmful or unpleasant psychological impact on the target person or group that's receiving the microaggression. And they can be on the basis of anything. I will focus a little bit on race, but they can be based on income, social capital, religion, ableness, gender, immigration status that we're all experiencing more these days, sexual orientation, and there's many other things. This is not only certain groups that will experience microaggressions. I really feel like everybody, regardless of how you externally identify yourself, has experienced microaggressions and delivered them. Every group's delivered them as much as they've received them. So the microaggression that I remember the most from growing up was the question of where are you from? So I started getting asked this question when I was in junior high, as far back as I could remember. And somebody would look at me and say, where are you from? And initially I would answer, oh, I know exactly what you're asking me. You're asking me whether I'm Indian or not, because you're asking me because of the color of my skin. And so I would respond with, well, I'm Indian. And then after a while, I don't know what, but I started to respond passive aggressively. So people, as I got older, and I didn't know how to deal with microaggressions, somebody would ask me, where are you from? And I'd say, well, I was born in Wisconsin and I grew up in Chicago. And then the follow-up question I would get is, well, no, where are you really from? And it would just sit a little bit wrong. I didn't know why it sat wrong, but I knew I didn't want to answer it straightforward, even though I knew exactly what somebody was asking me. I couldn't answer it with, well, my parents immigrated from India in the 60s and I was born here. I'm culturally Indian, but I'm really American. Like, I didn't want to go. It was such a simple question, but it created seconds worth of a response in my head that would make me pause. And depending on where I was mood-wise or sleep-wise or who was asking, I would answer in all different ways. So there's lots of examples of microaggressions. And there was a great article in JAMA and it titled, My Name is Not Interpreter. And this was in 2016. So I do recommend that you read this at some point. But Dr. Montenegro describes his own scenario. He had just finished his dissertation and he was going out to dinner with his mentors, and he was wearing a tuxedo. His partner was all dressed up as well. They went to this fabulous meal, celebrated his accomplishment, came out to get his car. He was standing at the valet stop and somebody pulled up in their car, got out of their car and threw him their keys, because they assumed that he was the valet service. And he accepted the keys because he was so stunned, he didn't know what to do. He's like, I was all dressed up. I just celebrated this big accomplishment. And this person's automatic response as they got out of their car was to assume that I was the one that was going to park their car. And so he talked about sort of how it completely deflated the accomplishment he had just celebrated. And he talked a little bit about some examples of microaggressions as well. So I won't belabor this too much because I'm going to get to some of the sub definitions that will describe these as well. So these sub definitions within microaggressions, there are things called micro assaults, micro insults, and micro invalidations. So let me go through micro assaults first. So these are uncommon and they are deliberate. So they're intentional and they're clearly oppressive, discriminatory. And examples of this is refusing service to a certain group of people, skipping over people in line, displaying some sort of paraphernalia that identifies with a group that may be oppressive towards another group. So these are, I don't know that some people would say that these aren't micro, but they're definitely assaults. So they're intentional. Micro insults and invalidations are not intentional. And these typically occur due to underlying biases and prejudices that are outside of the awareness of the person who's delivering them. And so that can sometimes be a little tricky about, if I wasn't meaning to be harmful, how can I correct this? How can I change this? Do I constantly walk around on pins and needles about what I'm saying? Micro insults sort of convey an insensitivity, are rude or demeaning towards an individual's identity or heritage. And then micro invalidations they exclude or negate or nullify an individual's thoughts or feelings. So let me go through some practical examples so you know what I mean. So if somebody says, you speak good English, that is a micro insult. So what the comment's really saying is, well, you don't seem like you'd be somebody who would speak English very well. You aren't truly American underlying all of this. Well, wow, I should really commend you on how well you're doing in this arena. Similar to, you are so articulate. So it's unusual for someone of your demeanor, race, whatever outward characteristic you have to be intelligent. So that's a micro insult. When you say, when I look at you, I don't see color, this is the micro invalidation. This is sort of taking away a person's experience based on who they are, either racially in this case or ethnically. So the experience that they've had, you're sort of saying, you know, I don't see that at all. And the person who's saying it may mean it as a way to say, I'm not biased towards you, but it actually does the exact opposite. A store owner following a customer of color around the store. Now that's going to be a micro assault. That's very obvious. It's saying, I see you, and what I see is somebody who may steal something from my store. So I'm going to walk around and follow you. My best friend is Black. So this is a micro invalidation. What it's saying is, I don't, you know, I'm immune to treating you with any sort of bias because I understand your experience just as much as what you've had because I've been in contact with it. I'm not going to go through every example. I'll give you a couple more, but the slide deck and this will be available later. But you know, the concept of everyone can succeed in America if they work hard enough. The pulling yourself up by your bootstraps is what you've heard. This is a micro invalidation. So what it's doing is saying the experience that you've had for whatever reason isn't necessarily valid. What it is that you just haven't worked hard enough, and that's why you haven't succeeded. So whatever systemic issues that you may have faced because of whatever characteristic we're talking about, that's really shouldn't be an issue. I'm going to skip some of these other ones just so we can get to, are microaggressions really a problem? So oftentimes when I speak on this, the question of, well, you know, that question of where are you from? One of my colleagues once said to me, I'm really just trying to connect with somebody. I ask that of every single person. It doesn't matter what color they are, what, you know, what ethnic background they may have. It's one of the ways I bond with patients when they come into my office. So how am I supposed to realize that the person who was receiving that may be reacting to years worth of being asked this question when my intention really is good? And I think the question is, well, do you assume that microaggressions are really a problem if they are unintentional or not? And so I'm going to give you a little bit of examples as we go forward to try to convince you that microaggressions are a problem and do have an effect on the individuals that experience them. And the biggest thing to assume in order to come to that conclusion is that we've been socialized into a society in which there exists individual, institutional, and societal biases. And those are associated with every one of those categories that I mentioned on that slide in terms of who can experience microaggressions. The key is that none of us are immune from inheriting the biases of our ancestors, institutions, and society. So we all have them. And it's understanding that we may not necessarily be in tune with all of them that will help understand why these are a problem and who could be experiencing them. So biases are really, there's three different definitions I wanted to focus on. One is explicit bias. So these are the biases that you're aware that you have. That they're at the forefront of when you decide or make an assumption about something, you understand that you may be a little biased because you got mugged once and now you're a little hesitant when you walk down the street. And so you're very conscious of who's around you, and you may hold your keys between your fingers just in case to protect yourself. But that's because of an experience you had before. But you're like, yes, I know it's because I had this experience that I may have this bias. Implicit bias or unconscious bias is another term that people will often use in exchange of implicit bias, are based on positive or negative attitudes that you may hold that are outside of your conscious awareness or control. And the fact that you're not aware of them is the most important part of this. Confirmation bias is when you will unconsciously seek out evidence that supports your assumptions about whatever bias you may have, and it feeds the bias that you have, saying, see, I was right. Here's another instance where a person of color has attacked somebody or is going to be more violent than somebody who isn't of pigmented skin. And so all of these things play into how we approach the world. And I'm going to try to get everybody to use implicit bias instead of unconscious bias, because I think the terminology is important. Implicit bias is that it connotes that people have it inherently in their system. It's inbuilt and it's understood. Unconscious seems to allow people to like say, well, if I don't even know it's there, then I'm not going to try to even deal with it. So I feel like that just the negative terminology of unconscious allows people to not deal with it. And so I'd like to say explicit bias and implicit bias in terms of how we refer to this stuff. The key is that biases often help you navigate the world in an effective way. So it's not bad that you have biases. They allow decision making to happen a little bit more quickly. And our brains have evolved to sort of filter out information. So we see what we're going to see so that we can move through the world, and all of the stimuli aren't preventing us from functioning. So in general, biases do help us, but they also can cause problems. And it's understanding where that balance lies that can be really important for dealing with microaggressions. So I'm going to share a small video with you, and if for some reason the volume or doesn't come through, please let me know, but I think this is a good awareness test.
This is an awareness test. How many times does the team in white pass the ball? If you answered 13 passes, you are correct. But did you see the moonwalking gorilla?
So I love that video because after you've seen it once, you'll always catch it. But I think realizing that when your brain is looking for something specific, that is what you're going to see, and you're going to miss other details that may be remarkable, that there's a gorilla in the middle of this basketball court. And so again, bias is, what am I looking for? And is that the only thing I see? So there's a great book, it's called Blind Spot. It talks about the hidden biases of good people, and it focuses on why do we have biases? Again, they help us navigate the world. Where do they come from? They come from the people that we've interacted with, whether it's our family members, the smaller groups that we're a part of, the institutions that we're a part of. It could be within religious institutions. It can be within the educational system that you've been a part of, your community, and then our entire society. So our society as a whole has biases, and those all influence how you go about approaching the world. One of the great ways to test where your biases may lie is the implicit association test, which is available to you online. It was put out by the Harvard system, and it is described in various places, and I'll talk about the study in just a second. But what the implicit association test is, it requires participants to rapidly pair two social groups with either positive or negative attributes. And you can do it based on color, but of skin, or you can do it based on gender. You can do it, there's the IAT, which you can look up online and then do these tests yourself, is available for various different groups. The one other thing to realize is, as physicians or healthcare providers in general, we feel like we're very educated and aware of who we are as people and how we take care of other people. And so oftentimes we think, okay, well, we must not have the same sort of biases as other people. And so there was a study done in 2018 to look to see, well, do healthcare providers also have some of these biases based on their response to the IAT tests? And so what happened was participants were categorized or were told to categorize white faces with positive words, and then white faces with negative words, and then the opposite, and then scored on the timing of their responses. And white faces with positive words were associated with positive words more quickly and with fewer errors than when categorizing black faces with pro-white bias. So saying physicians also have the same biases as the general population. We are no different. And most healthcare professionals across multiple levels of training, so this was not just residents, younger, it was not just older, people in the later part of their careers, the entire spectrum, have implicit biases against Black, Hispanic, American Indian, and dark-skinned individuals in general. So what does that mean? So it means that most healthcare providers have positive attitudes toward whites and negative attitudes towards people of color. And that can translate in how we provide care. And so, providers explicitly preferred whites to African Americans in terms of how easy it was to take care of them. And that there was a significant, a higher feeling of warmth towards white Americans than there was towards people of color. And so they were thought to, the terminology was that they were more medically cooperative. And so you might be more likely to offer a test or more likely to go out of your way for somebody if you think that they're going to be more compliant with your recommendation. And so you may not offer things in the same way, even though consciously you think that you would provide this similar care to all people. So what can this lead to? So this can lead to inaccurate or compromised clinical assessments, differences in treatment recommendations, differences in communication and quality of time that you spend with your patients. And over time, that leads to an erosion of trust between the health professionals and their patients. Similarly, this can affect the way we interact with our colleagues and our assessment of trainees, staff, residency and fellowship selection, so who we're letting into certain programs and why. And then promotion. So it doesn't matter what level of training you are at, having to deal with these types of biases in the workplace can affect your overall trajectory and your sense of well-being, value, and rates of burnout. And again, most people are unaware that they have these biases, and they think that they're basing their decisions on facts of a situation rather than their underlying bias. So one example of this is where this was a study that was done several years ago, and they took a document. So this was in the law school, and they took a document, and the document was exactly the same name, same year of post-law training, and they went to the same school. The only difference for the document in terms of what was given to the person assessing it was the race or ethnicity of the person who wrote the article. And then they had them grade it based on, how good this document was versus not. And in general, they put in a bunch of errors that could be found. And so based on race alone, they found that there were 15 errors found for the document that was considered written by an African American versus 10 errors for the same document written by a Caucasian student. And the tone of the comments was totally different. So that for the person of color, it was needs lots of work, can't believe this person went to NYU, average at best, versus the Caucasian associate, which was generally good writer, but needs to work on, has potential, good analytic skills. So it's just the tone that's different. You imagine being the person receiving this feedback, and over time, if you continue to receive feedback like this, what would it do to your motivation to continue or to work harder? So microaggressions are constant, and they're continual without an end date. And I think that's the other part of this that's really important. It may seem very small to ask somebody where they're from, but when I was in 6th grade, it wasn't necessarily a problem. By the time I got to college, it would cause this little bit of angst when I would answer it. So it was the cumulative effect of having answered that question for years. And they have to be deciphered. So it requires a pause and what does this person mean? Why are they asking me this? So I can't just answer without feeling like that there's something deeper, even though the question seems so simple. And they're constant reminders of a person's unequal status in society. And I think that also devalues the individual. They can obviously symbolize past historic injustices, which also cumulatively over time can be very disruptive. So like I said, it requires a pause when somebody receives a microaggression. So they have to sort of stop and say, did I interpret that correctly? Did that person say what I think she said? What did he mean when he said that? Should I say something at the moment, like that I'm taking this the wrong way, or I'm upset by this? Saying something may make this worse, so I should really just ignore it and move on. They're going to think I'm overreacting, and speaking up is going to hurt more than it helps. So over time, to constantly go through that can lead to a lot of discomfort. Including anxiety, depression, sleep difficulties, diminished confidence, helplessness, loss of drive, that feeling of value, the feeling like you can contribute effectively to an organization or a group can all lead to burnout eventually as well. So there's a lot of studies looking at sort of the cumulative consequences of microaggressions. And I'm not going to go through each of these studies, but I have them here in case you want to reference them. And the biggest thing I want to point out is these studies are old. They're starting in 2001, and there are recent studies as well, but there's been data on this stuff for 2 decades. So we know that being exposed to microaggressions can really have cumulative consequences for the people who are receiving them. So I'd love to share this video about what microaggressions can do if people continually receive them. So I'll give this a minute and let you watch this.
For people who still don't think that microaggressions are a problem,
Oh, you're so well spoken.
just imagine, instead of being a stupid comment, a microaggression is a mosquito bite.
Ugh, it's a compliment.
Mosquito bites and their itch are one of nature's most annoying features. But if you're only bitten every once in a while,
No, where are you really from?
Cleveland?
sure, it's annoying, but it's not that big a deal. The problem is that some people get bitten by mosquitoes a lot more than other people. I mean, a lot more. Whether it's on a date,
Oh, your English is so good.
Excuse me?
going grocery shopping,
You know, everything happens for a reason.
I'm just buying apples.
commuting to work,
So when are you gonna have a baby?
watching TV,
We have to keep the Redskins name. It's part of our culture and history.
or just walking down the street with your partner.
I couldn't even tell you were gay.
Mosquitoes seem to pop up everywhere.
Do you know John? Give me shopping advice. I love Cher too.
And getting bit by mosquitoes every day,
Can I touch your hair?
multiple times a day,
So pretty. Can
Can I touch
your
it,
hair?
please? Can I please?
is annoying and makes you want to go ballistic on those mosquitoes, which seems like a huge overreaction to people who only get bit every once in a while.
It's just a mosquito bite. Who cares?
Just another angry black woman.
Of course, beyond just being annoying, some mosquitoes carry truly threatening diseases that can mess up your life for years.
Astrophysics? Maybe you should try less challenging, Major.
Ow, my dreams.
And other mosquitoes carry strains that can even kill you.
He looked like he was up to trouble, okay? I felt threatened.
So next time you think someone's overreacting, just remember, some people experience mosquito bites all the time.
You're all so exotic. Wow.
And by mosquito bites, we mean microaggressions.
So I hope by giving you some definitions and some terminology to use to describe what you've either experienced yourself, oftentimes what you may have inflicted on somebody else or delivered to somebody else unintentionally, or been a bystander to, we can have a discussion about this. So I'd like to break out into smaller groups to allow for some of this open discussion. And I've put together a couple of scenarios to allow for the discussion, but really if people would like to share their experiences in the smaller groups, I think that's really important. And I think the goal of the breakout sessions is to allow for the discussion of what have you experienced? What have you seen? Do you think it was a problem? And I want to try to save the how do you deal with them? When do you deal with them for our next session, where I'll give you a little bit of a framework for how to necessarily approach microaggressions, depending on whether you're the person delivering it, receiving it, or a bystander. So we will do that the next time. I have a couple situations, and there are going to be facilitators for the breakout groups that can reference these if there's not individual discussion that happens.